Alright, so you guys can see that I put this little band here on the ground. This is just a piece of nylon, and you don't need to do this. You can use tape. I just felt like the seam in this puzzle might not be particularly visible to you. But you can take just a hardwood floor and you can just see the lines that are in there, and you can use that as a reference. You can use a deck, you can use whatever. Put a piece of tape down on the ground or just a piece of rope just like I just did here. So when we're talking about lunges and having issues with lunges, and especially when it comes to balance and stability, the thing is that our hips don't really work very well in kind of this position. They sure as hell don't work very well here. So you can see that my hips started to tilt here. I'm a little bit off balance, right? And so when we do a lunge, what people tend to do a lot of times is that they will basically start on the line and they'll come here. Right? And this is where people kind of start to lose their balance. I'm having trouble stabilizing here. Why is that? Because my hips, for one, we have this sacrum here, which is going to be acting as a spacer, right? So the heads of our femurs are being held apart, and then we're trying to basically pull them into the same position, but we've got that spacer in there, right? So and also, the shape of the femur, it's, bone, and then it juts out where it goes into the into the pelvis. And so, basically, our femurs don't cross very well, right? We can do it, we physically can do it, but it's taking and putting our muscles into a less mechanically advantageous position, and it's kind of handicapping them a little bit, and then you have to adjust and all that. So I want to do when we're starting to address and start to look at how we should be doing a lunge, notice that I'm standing here and I've got about 3 inches here between each foot and the line. So I'm in this anatomical neutral position. I'm well balanced here, and I'm going to step forward, right? And you see that my foot has landed 3 inches on this side of the line. My back heel has popped up and my knees pointed straight down into the ground. So in my first standing posture, my knees and my toes are pointing straight ahead. When I come forward here, everything's still pointed ahead. And a lot of times what I see sometimes is when people kind of step forward, sometimes they'll go into internal or external rotation in the back foot, right? And then their heel will collapse down and their toes is be pointing out this way. I cannot do a lunge from this position, right? Because if I start to bend both knees equally, you see my weight's starting to go over this way. And I know you've never experienced that specifically just like that before, and you've never seen somebody do that, because usually what will happen is that people will step forward, especially if they're doing a walking lunge, and they'll get into this external rotation of the foot. And then when they start going, the foot will have to adjust when they come down, and when it's going through that adjustment, there's going to be some stability issues that are going to be caused by that foot going through that adjustment motion. So it's very, very important that when I'm doing a walking lunge, I'm doing a drop lunge or anything, when I do that step forward, is I'm really, really thinking about this back leg just as much as I am the front one. We have a tendency as humans to only worry about where we're going, not where we're rooted, right? So I'm going to keep this root in the ground, keep it pointing forward, and I have my knee slightly bent a little bit now. Now, once I started moving forward, I'm going to draw my weight straight down. I'm not going to continue forward because, again, that's going to put a lot of extra pressure on my my front leg's quadricep tendon here, right? So from here, I'm going to start to drop down, and I'm going to tap my knee to the ground. And remember, guys, I know that in the past, I've said this many times, but a lot of trainers will tell you, don't ever touch your back knee to the ground. And what they're really trying to prevent you from doing is rooting that knee into the ground, right? So it's okay if you make light contact, but once you get down there, don't put any weight on that. And once you start getting the feeling of what a lunge should feel like down, you can start to go down and not touch, because you know you're already doing it right? And so what happens here a little bit, if I go from the side view a little bit, is that a lot of times people will do this, okay? So, and this is why I have people touch the ground with their back knee, is because they come down and they don't bend it, and they're like, why can't I get any further down into this, and I'm feeling all this tightness here, and it's because you're not bending your back knee, right? So if I get here, and I want to go through that, because again, I'm working both legs at all times. And it's one of the things that I've considered a lot as a personal trainer over the years about when it comes to alternating movements is that when one arm or one leg is moving and the other one's not, it's basically getting a rest period, and the lactic acid buildup in that muscle is going to go down, and so you're not going to get quite as much out of that exercise as had you continue going. So lunges are no exception to this, right? So if I'm just working that front leg, when the other leg is working, the other one's not doing anything, right? So that's why I'm staying active here, right? Going through and dropping straight down and bending that back knee. So that's the first couple things that's going to happen is, for one, and it could also be, sometimes I've encountered this as well, is people step too far, right? And my back knee is way past my hips, right? It should be directly under my hips. And I can actually feel tension in my knee when I do that, and it's harder to stabilize here. So if you're stepping too far forward, that could also be contributing to you not being able to stabilize there. Now, depending on what you're feeling in there, I want you guys to be really, really mindful of what you kind of feel and what you're noticing about your body, and especially doing it with like Vibram's minimalist shoes or going barefoot when you're practicing, especially at home, is feeling how your foot is contacting the ground, right? So if you're just standing, you can put your arch up and feel that lack of pressure on the ground in your arch here, right? Now, bring your knees together and flatten your feet, right? Feel that heavy contact in that arch where that arch is just being stretched and flattened there, and start getting used to what that feeling feels like. So it's going to help us diagnose why you might be feeling like you're unstable with that front leg, right? The back leg, usually I don't find that people have too much in the way of stability issues where that back leg is the one that's wobbling and going crazy. It's usually the front one. So when we start to go down, if you're feeling, your foot moving like crazy, usually it's going to be moving in a specific way. It's going to go from neutral and flatten, or it's going to go from neutral and the arch is going to go up, right? And so if we're feeling a constant regular pattern with that, where and with me it's usually that my arch comes up, it doesn't usually flatten, because I have often pretty high arches, but sometimes I get flat arches. It depends on where my muscle balance is, right? And so if we are feeling that our arches are coming up, that means that our anterior tibialis is overactive in this muscle, in this workout. So what we can be doing with that is we can take a foam roller, which I just had, right? Put it on the ground and stack my legs and go over the anterior position of our legs. And it's really important that if that's the issue and your arch is just way overactive, that when you are doing that you're not going onto the side, but you're just staying onto the anterior tibialis here, right? And the reason for that is this is the, on this side, is kind of the synergist / antagonist of that muscle, right? Synergists are muscles that work together to create movement, and antagonist is one that does the opposite. So if you think about your biceps as being a prime mover, your triceps are going to be the antagonist. So as your biceps shorten, your triceps are going to lengthen, right? And vice versa. So the peroneal longus comes down here and it attaches to the outside of your foot, whereas the anterior tibialis, which is right in the front, crosses over your ankle complex and goes in here. They both work on doing this dorsiflexion, where it pulls your toes back to your nose. So that's how they are synergists, is they both will work on that movement. But the contrast to that is that if the peroneal longus is tight, it's going to pick up on the outside of your foot and flatten your arch, right? And your anterior tibialis, like if it's too tight, it's going to pull up on your arch. So again, if you go back to the shoulder video I just did, you can see all the techniques there. But again, we can use foam rollers here. We can use potentially a lacrosse ball, right? We can use lotion on our muscle here. We can pull back and then go into a point, right? And just put a little bit of pressure on that muscle to kind of do a little bit of kind of active release here. And again, when our anterior tibialis is shortened, notice that my foot curves up, so my big toe is the closest part, my pinky toe stays away, right? And when I lengthen that muscle, it's going to do the opposite. My big toe is going to be the furthest extended, my pinky toe is going to be back. So we want to make sure that when we're doing that kind of active release, is that we're going from the highest position here, which is going to have that toe circled inward, and we're going to circle that toe out as we point. And we can go all the way along that muscle in little steps if you wanted to. The other thing you do is you can go through and you can do Graston through there to release any types of knots and whatnot. And again, you know, you might be thinking, well, this is a small muscle compared to your perineal longus and your calf muscles, right? Soleus and gastrocnemius. And so, you know, why is this muscle the one that's becoming overactive if it's the mechanically disadvantaged one? Well, that's exactly the reason, right? Is that you have your calf muscles, your perineal longuses. If these are tight and they're flattening your arches out and they're creating instability in your ankle, then your anterior tibialis is going to be stuck into this long, elongated position and trying to pull all the time, which is going to cause it to spasm and cramp up and create scar tissue, which is going to make it a shorter muscle and an exhausted one. So if you're experiencing, you know, this arch kind of coming up all the time, releasing this muscle is going to be part of the solution, but it's not going to be the full thing. And so you might still decide to go through and do the same thing to your anterior tibialis or your perineal longus, as well as your soleus and gastrocnemius. And you know, another one that could be fatigued is going to be your posterior tibialis, but that's going to be a little bit of a harder one to get to because that's going to be on the other side here, and it's also going to attach it into this arch. So, creating like a balance in here and like trying to find those scar tissue areas is going to make a really, really big difference on how well that leg stabilizes when you go through that lunge. Now, once you kind of have gone through that and you've started to identify if there is an issue, and it could be just this is just wobbly, right? You've gone through and your form is absolutely perfect, my hips are square and all that, and it's still doing this thing where my foot is not really able to control the movement. Well, then we have to go in and we have to start to train that. So the first thing that we would do is we would get like an Erickson pad, which I don't currently own because I personally don't need one, but it would be a good thing to get. Or you can get like these little inflatable discs that you can do. And you're just put it under that front foot, and it's going to create a soft, unpredictable surface, right? And it's going to cause more of that shakiness. And that's what you want, right? So if you can get this to be somewhat stable, we're going to progress it by going from a solid surface onto one that's a little bit less stable. And so one of the ones that I will also use will be a Bosu, right? And so I will step forward, and you can go here, you can go on top, and now you have this unevenness that you have to start to contend with. And what that's going to do is it's going to constantly trip up those muscles so that they have to learn how to stabilize that muscle and to work together. So stepping on an uneven surface, making it go through that range of motion, making it try to stabilize on an uneven surface is going to train those muscles to behave better, right? Be able to function better. And the last bit about that is that this is everything I just said is without weight. So once you get to the point where you can do that and it stops wobbling, and especially if you get here and there's absolutely no wobble to this anymore because the ankle joint knows what it's supposed to do now, now you can start adding weight. So you can do dumbbells, you can do a barbell, you can do a weighted vest, whatever works for you, and you can go through this, right? And you might find that that wobbliness starts to come back in once you have weight because you've changed one of the factors in there, and that's how much resistance is involved. From there, if you were finding that, okay, it's still being rather wobbly, well, let's actually backtrack a little bit because there is more to this. We talked about the lower joint, the ankle joint, right? But it's not going to be necessarily the only one that's in play. And so, and we've talked about this when I've talked about like doing a squat assessment where you come down and you might see, you know, this type of thing, your hips might migrate, different things are going to happen in that squat assessment that is going to indicate that there's something else going on there. So, you know, if you've gone through the ankle stuff and you're still feeling really wobbly here, it could be something going on in the hips. So again, we have our glute maximus, which is going to wrap around and it's going to pull us into external rotation, right? Whereas your glute medius goes on both sides of your, it attaches in about the same area, but then it goes on both sides of your femur and it causes external and internal rotation. And then you have your glute minor, which causes internal rotation. Then you have On the inside here, you have your different adductor complexes, right? Which is the muscles that pull back in. So the glutes and all that, that's going to pull out. This one's going to pull in. And so the especially like your adductor magnus wraps around, attaches here, comes down, wraps around, and can cause internal and external rotation. So if that becomes tight, that could be part of the problem. Your sartorius comes down and crosses across, right? And when it shortens, it causes external rotation. It's the thinker muscle because that, right? It causes this sort of motion. So that could be something that's becoming tight. You also have a muscle that comes down and it feeds into your IT band where your glutes feed into, right? And that causes internal rotation. That's your tensor fasciolata. That's going to be your TFL, right? So if you were finding, the ankle's not bad, but I'm still having stability issues that might be coming from the hip. And so what are we going to do? It's kind of the same strategies, right? So pay attention to what kind of movement is happening here, right? If it's going from center to internal rotation as you're coming down, that's going to imply that your internal rotators are what's tight. If it's going outward from center all the time as you're coming down, that's going to imply external rotation. And again, doing your squat assessment can confirm this. So when you come down, if you're coming to this direction, your hips are migrating to over this foot, that it means that the internal rotators on this side are overactive and the external rotators are underactive. So if you're doing, one way that we can start to address this is, again, we can start going through with a foam roller. We can use a massage ball like this guy. We can use lacrosse balls. We can do some active release in there. We can do some Graston in there. We can do massage. That's going to help release that. But sometimes it's a learned thing, right? Where your muscles have been doing this for so long, even if there is no adhesions, there's no tension in here that's causing that, it could also be that those muscles need to be retrained. So if I am coming down into a lunge and I'm getting this internal rotation and I've ruled this out, even if I haven't really, what I want to do is I want to take an elastic band, one of these guys, and I'm going to attach it to my knee, right? And I'm going to attach it to a point over on the side so that when I'm going through these motions, and I guess, I don't really have a place to anchor off of, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and encourage my leg to go in the bad direction, the direction it's already going, okay? And the reason for that is my brain and my body is going to be like, oh shit, I need to correct this. And it's going to engage those muscles that are underactive and pull you back into the proper position, right? And you can even actively do it. But again, the reason why we're doing this is to kind of encourage that external rotation if we have an internal rotation issue. If we have the opposite, we go the opposite direction, right? We encourage internal rotation because we need to overcome our external rotation. Okay? So this is kind of the same idea. Like when we talk about people who have kyphotic posture, a lot of times we'll go out and we'll buy like nylon harnesses that will pull us into this position so we can like be in good posture all day long, which is good because it's going to stop your rhomboids and your other muscles that are and your lower trapezius that are trying to pull back. They're going to help them get into that position, but it's not going to resolve the issue, right? Because again, the issue is that shrugging, it's the anchoring of the pec minor and all that. It's just going to stop the damage that's happening in those lower back muscles that are trying to pull your scapula back together and down. And so what we recommend a lot of times is that we'll actually take a band, probably not this kind, but the ones that are full loops, right? And we'll create kind of a harness that goes behind the shoulders, not exactly like this, but it's going to pull us into that kyphotic posture, right? And encourage that, and then we'll tell you to go run. Right? And when you run, you're going to come up and you're running in good posture. So what we're doing is we're creating more resistance to train those muscles that are weak to do the work for themselves. Because if you're relying on a harness that does all the work for you, those muscles are going to atrophy and they're going to become weaker. So we want to release any type of tension that might be and scar tissue that might be causing that the bad posture or the bad movement pattern to be happening. We want to be training the muscles that are underactive to become more active. We want to start adding stability training into it. We also want to make sure that we're doing things in a anatomically sound way. Okay, so I hope this helps, guys, and I hope that it's, try it, work with it, see if it works for you, and let me know if something isn't working or if things are getting worse, or you have questions. Because again, guys, a lot of times when I make these videos, especially since like the first little couple months there where I was just putting out everything, a lot of times when you see these videos now, it's because somebody's come up and they've asked me a question, and I'm going to address that question. So don't hesitate to ask, because if you ask, I'm going to make an answer, and I'm going to give it to you. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this helps, and you guys have a lovely evening. And if you're annoyed by me stuttering and stumbling and whatnot, I'm not a professional, and fuck you. So I'm just doing my best here, and I hope you can respect that. So thank you very much, guys. You guys have a lovely evening, and we'll see you next time.